Hi, folks. Let's see. I just wanted to show a couple things I found on the interwebs. It's funny. This one I searched yesterday: Epstein success, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, because I think it was Glenn Greenwald who pointed out that when Epstein had been asked where he got his wealth from as a financier, he said he had gotten it uh, from his work with Bill Gates and Donald Trump. So I was trying to find that quote, so I just searched that, and this video came up. But today it did not come up. So that was like yesterday, I believe. It came up first thing, I think. It was the top one. Today it didn't come up at all, so I had to add the word Google onto it, and then it came up. So that was interesting that they seem to have changed the results. Like yesterday I had watched it and texted it to a lot of people and posted it on Getter. So maybe that's why they removed it from the algorithm or whatever somewhat. But anyway, so it's basically showing that Google suppresses. I've noticed that a lot of things related to Epstein and these shady people, if you try to search them, obvious common searches will not show up in the, automatic, anyway, she'll show how this.
How the words work, but the world's most notorious child.
Okay, let's go to the beginning.
Hello and happy rainy Sunday. Today, I wanted to basically do a video about something that I've been seeing on Google when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and how I think that Google is suppressing specific Jeffrey Epstein searches. That's right. I know Jeffrey Epstein is dead. I'm still talking about him. I think we all should be. It's absolutely insane. And I'm new to YouTube, so I don't know how the words work, but the world's most notorious child trafficker of all time, the most notorious. No idea who any of his clients were. Isn't that a little bit bizarre to you? Like, just this whole idea that Jeffrey Epstein is now dead and they're trying to say, case closed. It's really not. There's a bunch of people involved. So I was Googling around on him because I've been obsessed with this case for years. And let me share my screen with you here so I can show you some of the stuff that I have found. So let's say you are in Google here and you want to find out something about Jeffrey Epstein. Let's just type in his name and the autocomplete is going to fill. Jeffrey Epstein. Now, what comes up? Obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell is going to be there. I feel like people would probably tie those two names together the most. Prince Andrew, that makes sense too. Something that I'm interested in is how crazy it is that two US presidents had full-on relationships with this man. That's absolutely bonkers. And it's both on the left and on the right. So let's go and try to look up Trump. Everyone's seen the video of Jeffrey Epstein and Trump hanging out. Now, funny enough, his name will never come up in this search, even though when you search this, look at this. We have almost 3 million results. And everybody's been Googling Jeffrey Epstein and Trump, so why doesn't it come up, right? So let's say here you're typing in Trump, they're not giving it to you. And Trump just doesn't come up. Instead, truth and lies, true crime, you click on these things. Look, that's literally a third of the results, so why is Trump not coming up? Now, the same thing will happen for Clinton. Look at that. Everyone knows Bill Clinton flew on his plane 26 times. Jeffrey Epstein went to the White House when Bill Clinton was president multiple times. And look, not coming up in the auto search. Even though when you do enter this, once again, you have over 1 million results. There's photos of them together. It just makes no sense why Google would not be suggesting this. Someone else who has been associated with Jeffrey Epstein in the news, but if you type in his name, it's not going to come up, is Bill freaking Gates. What comes up is the Bill Barr-Darton school that Jeffrey Epstein worked at. Look at that, 1.6 million results, and it's not coming up in the autocomplete. This term that they do suggest for us, though, Bill Barr-Darton school, 185,000. What the hell? Now, I talked about this on TikTok, and a bunch of people suggested I try DuckDuckGo instead, and the results are different. So let's say we want to type in Clinton's. Immediately, it starts coming up. The art, connection, things like that. And remember how Google wouldn't even throw in any autocomplete suggestions after we type Jeffrey Epstein Clinton? Here on DuckDuckGo, you have link, foundation, which I would love for people to look into that because there's a lot of connections there. And the same thing will happen for Trump. You start typing it in, Trump photo comes up, Trump's cabinet, Trump quote, pictures of them together. So this is obviously a much more honest search engine. Lastly, Bill Gates. There we go. He pops up right at the top, as he should, with Bill Barr down here. Also, Bill Cosby. Now, look, I know that Google autocomplete, auto search, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with that. I have asked everyone in my family, and different people on TikTok have tried it. So this isn't something that's limited to, I don't know, where you're searching in the country or what your previous search results have been. And what I'm really looking for is an answer. If Jeffrey Epstein Trump has 3 million results popping up, why is Google not surfacing that as something that people are searching? They obviously are searching it. Everyone's searched that term before who's interested in this case. So was Google paid off by these individuals to not have their name associated with Jeffrey Epstein? Was Google or executives at that company associated with Jeffrey Epstein? And that's what they're doing on the back end. We have records for years of Jeffrey Epstein basically using his power and privilege to subdue the story of what was actually going on with him. We saw this with the ABC News anchors, so many different things over the years. And even though he's dead, this still has to be answered. So why do you think that Google is suppressing these searches of these specific men with Jeffrey Epstein? And who do you think asked for it to be done?
Okay, so there you go. I I sometimes don't understand why people like her who are supposed to be on top of this don't see the obvious, which is um, that Epstein is part of the government and so is Google. I mean, this is not hidden. Like, if you're an investigative reporter or investigative anybody, you should at least be able to find the shit that's not hidden. And it's not hidden the fact that Epstein was a CIA agent whose networks was there to like blackmail elites to control them for the CIA and for the MI6, you know, the British intelligence and Israeli military intelligence. That's on the record. So the fact that I'm the only one with only me and Whitney Webb talk about that just tells you everything you need to know about people, is that they don't want to know. They don't want to acknowledge the truth because then they realize that their tax dollars go to like raping kids. All right, this is okay here. So yeah, well, I mean, whatever. I don't know why she doesn't hasn't really looked into this enough, or supposedly hasn't seen the countless, you know, testimonies of, you know, Epstein being FBI, NSA, CIA, MI6, Mossad, Israeli military intelligence. I mean, let's see. Here's like Convo Couch is doing something about the Epstein family tree connections to Mossad. So that's definitely getting closer. I think I haven't finished this video, but it seems like Pasta is somewhat onto it. But I mean, the thing is, it's all out there in the open. Like, people are just ignoring all the quotes and all the testimony that shows that Epstein was part of the government and that everything he did was just a normal thing that our government does. And he was far from being the only person doing it for our government. Okay, where did this go? Okay, great. Now this thing disappeared. Okay. Awesome. So weird. So sets. Okay, this. Anyway, okay, sorry. So this is another thing. The memo: Democrats divided on whether to attack or ignore RFK Jr. And so this is an interesting thing where it shows you another more evidence of how Trump is controlled opposition. And, you know, because like people are like, oh, well, if Trump wasn't a good guy, you know, why would bad people be against him? Why would the government be against him? They're not against him. They're just calling him like a fat orange guy while they actively cover for his, you know, Epstein activities. So if that's what you think them being against him means, then okay, Good luck with that worldview. I mean, that's the normal worldview, which is why we're so easily controlled as a population. But this one, yeah, it shows that like when they really hate somebody, they don't talk about them on the media. Like they talk about Trump because they want, it's well known that the DNC wanted Trump to win the primary at the very least and be the Republican nominee. And it's also known that the DNC funds Trump candidates, Trump Republicans in their primaries, supposedly because they think they'll be easier to beat. But, it doesn't help with people's delusion that the two parties are actually separate things, because they're not. And Trump is not separate either. The surprising early strength of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s presidential campaign is sparking unease among Democrats and leaving them divided about what to do about it. Kennedy has drawn support between approximately 15 to 20% in recent polls of Democratic voters. It's a level that is not high enough to indicate he is seriously endangering President Biden's march to his party's nomination, but for a candidate often derided as an anti-vaccine crank who is running against an incumbent president, it is enough to make some Democrats sweat. Party strategists cleave into two camps on the question of how Biden and his campaign should respond. One faction argues that Biden should ignore Kennedy. Engaging him would only legitimize and elevate his candidacy, they say. Right? So notice they never did that to Trump. Before even like Trump hardly had started running, the Democrats and the mainstream media controlled by them were just nonstop Trump 24/7. So that's not what they do when they actually hate somebody. When they actually hate somebody, they ignore them. When they actually want to stop somebody, they ignore them. They needed Trump because Trump is one of them, and B, he was instrumental to getting rid of Bernie, getting Bernie out, because they're like, or at least they somehow seem to treat him as instrumental to that so-called argument of that we couldn't have Bernie as the Democratic nominee. So engaging him would only legitimize and elevate his candidacy like they did to Trump. The other school of thought holds that Kennedy is too dangerous a figure to let campaign unimpeded. The second camp notes that even if Kennedy never looks like a fully serious contender for the nomination, he could hurt Biden if he continues edging up in the polls. In a hypothetical scenario where Kennedy rose to 25% or 30% in polls, questions about Biden's age and political vulnerability would grow much sharper. Bill Carrick, a veteran Democratic strategist, urged the Biden campaign to take the high road and treat Kennedy as if he barely exists. So there you go. Veteran Democratic strategist, the same party that has never taken Trump's name out of their mouth for 1 minute since Trump first announced he was going to run for president in 2015. He's saying that if you actually are against a candidate, you treat them like they barely exist. The opposite of what they do to Trump. More evidence that Trump is their guy. I think they should ignore him. I just don't think there's any point in engaging in it. He's not the least bit of a threat to President Biden, and neither was Trump when they first started promoting him. But they made sure that he was able to win the Republican nomination. For card-carrying Democrats, their biggest concern is beating Trump, and the only way to do it is Biden. Which is it's like you literally need brainworms to like buy that, because just like Hillary, Biden polls the lowest against Trump compared to a Bernie or an RFK. RFK or Bernie would have destroyed Trump and did destroy Trump in most polls. Hillary and Biden did not. So This is just a blatant lie that they just repeated millions and millions of times, and some demented boomers bought it. Supposedly, a lot of people repeated it. But others warn that there are dangers in that approach. You can't let cancers metastasize, said Bakari Sellers, a CNN commentator and former Democratic state representative in South Carolina. So Sellers is calling Kennedy a cancer. That's pretty funny. Ironic. The purveyors of death call the guy calling them out the cancer. Sellers was scathing of Kennedy, whom he called a caricature, referring to his storied family history as the nephew of former President Kennedy and the son of the former Attorney General whose name he bears. Sellers added, he is probably the best example of an apple falling from the tree and rolling into a whole other orchard, parroting Putin talking points and so on. He is not John, he is not Robert, and he is more associated with the likes of Joe Rogan and Elon Musk than he is with James Clyburn or Hakeem Jeffries. Nobody likes those guys except their fellow CIA shills that have them on MSNBC and CNN and whatever. But Kennedy's willingness to engage with figures like Rogan has its own political advantages. Social media lit up in the wake of Kennedy's recent appearance on Rogan's podcast. Rogan offered scientist Peter Hotez a charity donation of $100,000 if he would debate Kennedy on the vaccine question. Hotez has so far declined. The back and forth has raised bigger questions about the merits of such public debates, especially between a respected scientist and someone who has frequently been criticized for trafficking in misinformation. So it's making people think debating isn't a good idea because they won't say it's because they will lose, but there's just some reason that you can't no longer hold your ideas up to public scrutiny in a debate. Either way, the Fuhrer delivers even more oxygen to Kennedy's campaign. This, in turn, is why some Democrats think ignoring him is not a workable strategy. You have to get in behind the scenes and take him apart. That's what they have to do. They don't want to openly engage with him. They get in behind the scenes and take him apart. That sounds very bad, especially to a Kennedy. Said New York-based Democratic strategist Hank Scheinkopf. Scheinkopf argued that a frontal attack on Kennedy from the Biden campaign would backfire since it would fuel him and fuel his followers who are drawn to his populist streak. Attacks from groups that are not directly affiliated with Biden might be more effective. So they get their friends or they do it under other little front companies, basically. Scheinkopf contended there is an abundance of ammunition that could be used against Kennedy, his critics note. In an early 2022 rally against vaccinations, Kennedy suggested the situation in the United States at the time was worse than when the Nazis were on the march in Europe. No, that's not what he said. He just said that it's more surveilled. And anyway, remarks that even his wife, the biggest shill of them all, actress Cheryl Hines, called reprehensible and insensitive and called him out on Twitter without talking to him first and forced him to apologize publicly on Twitter for something he never said. That is his biggest, Achilles heel, is that he will do anything that shill Cheryl says. So, yeah. It's a fact. Kennedy later apologized for referencing Anne Frank in the remarks. In another interview, Kennedy claimed that chemicals in drinking water were feminizing boys and causing sexual dysphoria. Probably true. A photo was widely disseminated on Twitter on Monday of Kennedy with Roger Stone and retired